Hello and welcome to the Time on Screen podcast. My name is Zach Kazan. I'm the editorial director at Worn and Wound. Joined today by Kat Shoulders, making her return to the Time on Screen podcast. Long dormant Time on Screen podcast, but we've brought it back for a special, very specific reason. Kat, welcome. Yeah. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I always love doing these podcasts. I love talking about movies. So we actually started talking about this in Geneva, and we were like, wait. Let's hold all our thoughts. We're going to record a podcast.
Yeah.
And here we are. Yeah.
Yep, here we are. We've the podcast has been a little absent. We've had other podcasts we've needed to record and to prep for Watches and Wonders. We've been quite busy. So Time on Screen took a temporary back seat, but we haven't stopped talking about movies. We talk about movies all the time off mic. True. And we have Windup Watch Fair San Francisco coming up in just as this podcast drops. Days. I think it's just like days, maybe a day away, depending on when we get this out. So the movie we're talking about today is San Francisco related. It's a great San Francisco movie. So we had to jump on and do a little time on screen for Zodiac, one of our favorite movies. I think a movie that we've discussed many times off mic. I'm really glad that we're going to be talking about it today in a more official capacity, because I have a lot to say about this movie, and I know you do as well. Same. Before we get into Zodiac, let's do a quick wrist check, because this is sort of a watch podcast still. There will be a watch that comes up in this conversation at some point. But what are you wearing today, Kat?
Well, I'm wearing my Zodiac today. In honor of this podcast, I am wearing a Zodiac. In honor
of the Zodiac killer. In honor.
Let's not say
you're wearing
of the killer of this podcast based on the movie.
Well, the alleged killer is the character that is seen wearing a Zodiac in this film.
I know.
So
Super Seawolf. This is their collaboration they did with eBay. Well, I can't really see it on the screen there, but eBay last year. It's got a reverse, I guess, a count up bezel instead of a count down bezel, which is interesting. But wearing it because it's on brand.
Yeah, that it is. Whether Zodiac appreciates that or not, I think is we know they don't. They don't like being associated with this movie. We'll talk about that. A little later. I'm wearing my my Arcanaut Arc 2 Fordite for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a beautiful spring day here in Concord, New Hampshire.
And this colorful.
This watch kind of just makes me think of like spring
rubber
and summer.
Strap.
Yeah, white rubber strap at that. I also I bought this watch at San Francisco Windup, so I always sort of like associate it.
Dang, I didn't think about that.
With San Francisco, and we're just right on the eve of that now. So
that's cool.
I've got the Arcanaut on today. Let's talk about talk about Zodiac at a high level. Obviously, spoiler warning for anyone who has not seen Zodiac and is not familiar with the true life story of
I guess there's
Zodiac
probably people
killer. This movie is based on real events.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it's sort of like in the docudrama category, really. Like David Fincher really did a lot of took great pains to make sure that this movie was historically accurate to a large degree.
He did.
Zodiac was a 2007 release, of course, directed by David Fincher, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Mark Ruffalo, Robert Downey Jr. Also, so many people in this movie. Chloe Sevigny, Anthony Edwards,
Brian Cox.
Brian Cox, fantastic.
Dermot Mulroney.
Yeah, he's kind of just randomly in this movie, for not very long. I think he plays the chief of police or he's like
essentially. I think he's
like kind of he's sort of like in 2007 was kind of like the biggest, not the biggest star in the movie, obviously, but like the biggest star in the movie that didn't have like a big role. Like you kind of see him come on the screen and you're like, oh, he's gonna be in this movie now, and then he's like in like one more scene. So that's just sort of like what this movie does. Kat, I want to ask you, as we always kind of start these conversations on the podcast, what was your first experience with Zodiac?
I'm sad that I did not see this in theaters when it came out. I was in high school at the time, and I don't know, maybe David Fincher wasn't really the director at for high school to draw me to the theaters at the time. But I will say I do remember watching this for the first time with my dad and my stepmother, and us all really sort of being really on the edge of our seat through a majority of this movie. And it's been a favorite ever since. And like you, rewatch this quite often, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just get right into it. What does it say about us that we watch and rewatch this movie so much? I posted on Instagram like a week or so ago when I was rewatching this movie, just like a little screenshot and said like time on screen prep, as I usually do when when I'm watching something for the pod. And Stephen Pulverant, watch media, watch industry figure, and a friend of ours messaged me. He's like, I love this movie. I rewatch it once a year, and I didn't respond telling him, I would rewatch it way more than that. It's
a comfort.
It's compulsively rewatchable. I think that like there's something like, I don't know, Fincher's like so like just really on his game in this movie. Yeah. Like everything is just kind of like so perfect. You just feel like you're in like very steady hands with him, and it's so well paced, and the performances are so good. And even in spite of the subject matter, I just find myself like coming back to it over and over.
I think once you get kind of past the murder scenes in the beginning of the movie, like it's really like this slow burn. It's soft. It's I mean, it's an investigative movie. I think more than even like a thriller, I would even call it. But I don't know. There is like a comfort feel, and I actually have this like a few of his films, actually, not just this one, but like there's a lot of his. I mean, he's one of my favorite directors, so I guess I rewatch a lot of his movies quite often. But yeah, I always come back to this one, and when I'm sort of on the couch surfing for something, and it's like a night that I can't find anything to watch, like I will often go to this movie many times.
Zodiac's always
because
there.
I don't need to also watch it all. It's a long movie. I think 2 hours and like 37 minutes or something.
About 2.5 hours. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like I know that I don't have to finish it, but it puts me to sleep sometimes. Like I don't know. It's a calming movie. Again, once you get past the maybe the first 30 minutes of it, but yeah.
Yeah, there's some grisly stuff early on, but then, like you said, it really kind of like settles down. And I want to talk specifically about the structure of the movie, because I think, one of the things about this movie that's so fascinating is the way it kind of like wrong-foots the audience, and like really would have like thrown people for a loop in 2007 when it was released. I think people were, not expecting this movie to be exactly what it was. So I remember seeing this movie in the theater and being like pretty excited for it as like, I was just out of college, or would have been like a year or two out of college in 2007. And I remember being excited for the new Fincher movie. And I remember also kind of like understanding that like this movie had been long in the works. It had gone through like a lot of, there's kind of like a production hell, story around this movie where like it was, the book by Robert Graysmith, which it's based on, had been optioned, and it had gone through like kind of multiple scripts and directors, and it was kind of finally being made and finally coming from David Fincher. And it was like a passion project of Fincher's, because he's from San Francisco and had kind of always wanted to make a movie about the Zodiac murders. So like I saw it in the theater and was very excited
during the Zodiac killer as a kid.
Yep. He lived through it. So and it was not murdered by the Zodiac. No. So thankfully. So I was excited for the movie, and I really loved it. And then it came out in March of 2007, and then the rest of 2007 happened. And 2007, of course, became this like historic movie year.
Yeah.
We've done a number of movies from 2007. No Country for Old Men it was 2007. That was the eventual Oscar winner. There Will Be Blood was 2007. Like Clayton, another great movie, 2007. So like right there, you've got 4 kind of like best
bangers,
of the decade contenders, and like coming out within months of each other in 2007. And I think that Zodiac coming out early in the year in March really kind of like handicapped it like later on. This movie did not win any Oscars, which is just mind-blowing to like think that, in hindsight. And I don't know that it should have won anything over No Country or There Will Be Blood. Like those are, I think, clearly sort of like like the best movies of the year. They're on like a different level, but like the way that
if this movie came out today, though, I think it would 100% be nominated. I think the standard was just different in the early to mid 2000s, and to your point, like it was the heyday of film still, and movies and blockbusters, and I 100% think this movie would do so much different today than it did back then.
It also would have been, a moment where, I mean, if this movie came out now, it would be a moment where people would be like, well, we have to we have to give Fincher his Academy Award, because he still has not won an Academy Award, which is insane. Obviously, I mean, we can go through, we will talk about later, our favorite David Fincher movies, but right in a row, we can just kind of run through the sort of like the run that he had, around Zodiac. So he had, a 5-year gap between Panic Room and Zodiac. And then Zodiac hits, Curious Case of Benjamin Button. That is a big Oscar movie, kind of like a lesser movie, in my opinion, in David Fincher's filmography. And then The Social Network comes, and he doesn't get an Academy Award for that. And then he does Girl with Dragon Tattoo, really underrated.
Yeah.
Gone Girl. And then he's in Netflix land with Mank about 6 years later. So like, it's never won an Oscar.
That's crazy.
I think there's speculation like he could, be like a, honorary Oscar person, at some point, like late in his career. But like now he really is kind of like making these movies for Netflix. He has this like longstanding relationship with them, and it's just like it's kind of hard to imagine him like winning the Best Director Academy Award. I will also say,
I think something notable to call out. So this movie came out in 2007. 1 year before Robert Downey Jr. does Iron Man and becomes basically a superstar. Also, I don't think Jake Gyllenhaal at the time was like a super leading man. I mean, he had been in a bunch of movies. Obviously, he's well known. I think probably maybe the most well known on the cast list initially. But like, and then Mark Ruffalo had obviously done a lot. But I just feel like, I feel like maybe it didn't get the amount of watches because there wasn't really like the star power in this movie at that time in 2007 versus like now Mark Ruffalo is even huge, and obviously Robert Downey Jr. is, and Jake Gyllenhaal has grown even more into like this superstar in Hollywood. So I feel like not that he didn't cast unknowns, but he casted folks like right before they kind of like blew up, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, this would have been like right at the beginning of kind of like the Robert Downey Jr. sort of like, resurgence. He was obviously like a very famous star in the like, I guess like late 80s, 90s. And then he had some personal problems. And this is sort of like when he's coming out from that.
Yeah, I think I can't remember. I looked up, he did like Gothica maybe 3 to 4 years before this movie. And which I also really like that movie a lot.
Yeah, that's an underrated movie.
But I remember seeing that and being glad to see Robert Downey Jr. because I've always been a fan for a really long time. And then he goes on to do Iron Man the next year. Yeah.
I think that Jake Gyllenhaal was probably like the biggest, like, he's like the top of the poster name, I think, in this movie. And it's just kind of strange to think about that. But also, like the timing of it before the comic book stuff really takes off. Of course,
oh yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. and Mark Ruffalo and Gyllenhaal, and they're both like,
and Gyllenhaal. I forgot about him.
Yeah, no, he was in a Spider-Man movie. Yeah,
they're all freaking superheroes.
Yeah, they all kind of like that. They all got sort of taken over by the comic book machine.
Been in a Marvel movie at this point, but yeah.
Well, I mean, DiCaprio hasn't.
Yeah, that's true.
Tom Cruise hasn't. Brad Pitt, like the big stars, like have I think wisely sort of like held off because you just get like swallowed up into the like the Marvel Cinematic Universe once you start. So like when I saw this movie, I remember thinking like, well, this is going to be like a big hit. This is going to be a big like Academy Award movie, and it was a modest hit, but it wasn't like a juggernaut or anything. And I think it really sort of found like an audience on streaming and video like after the fact, like so many movies. And it's just like you said, like we both have said, it's like it's just so compulsively rewatchable.
In doing some research for this film, I came across so many Reddit threads from the last like 5 or 6 years where people were basically just asking like, what are other similar films to this? Because people were just so obsessed with this movie and the fact that it is against like journalistic slow burn of a film and sort of thriller. Like they're seeking other movies like this, and there are some, and I'm sure we'll talk about towards the end of this podcast. But I found that interesting. I think like it has gained sort of a cult following since its release, and people are still now discovering it. Which is really cool.
I think maybe that's a good transition to kind of talking about like the structure of this movie and the way it sort of like wrong foots the audience. Because I think that the movie that Fincher has said the movie he's modeled this after. And I think that it has a lot of similarities to is All the President's Men. I don't know if you've seen All the President's Men.
Yeah.
but like it kind of has a similar, like I find the pacing to be similar, and the fact that it's like really a movie. They're both really movies about like doing your job and investigating something, and like, you know, kind of like just digging in and like uncovering layers of something.
Yeah.
And they both kind of reach these like
so many different
sort of
leads too. Like
Yeah.
it really changes direction. Like basically maybe 45 minutes before the end of the movie, and you're like, oh, well, this is a completely different direction than we were following previously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The difference, I think, the big difference between All the President's Men and Zodiac is that All the President's Men ends with this moment of like they got him, or like you understand like how they're going to get him.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
they're uncovering, you know, like they're, you know, they've uncovered like the Watergate scandal at this point, and Zodiac ends in this like completely ambiguous note.
Yeah, we don't know.
And like the movie has an opinion, I think, on like who the killer is, but like it's very clearly, you know, they make a point that it's unsolved. So like, but the pacing is similar, and you get to those moments in similar ways, but like the feeling you have is like it was very, very different. Like coming to both of them.
I mean,
and, like,
and to talk about the pacing a little bit more, again, we have these like big gruesome murder scenes at the beginning of the film, and like your heart is beating, it's a very anxious moment, and then the rest of the movie is like investigative and journalism, and you know, there's some thriller aspects to it, and I know we share some of the favorite scenes together, but like I could see how people maybe went to the theater and watched this and like maybe even left because they were like, this is so slow, I can't like stay for. And I think in some ways he might lose a level of audience because there isn't that aspect throughout the movie. But he certainly gives it to you right at the beginning. But I think it sets the tone for the rest of the movie too.
Yeah. I mean, so like this movie, like all the violence and everything is like at the beginning. You have these three murders kind of like back to back, and the main characters are introduced through those murders and through like the response to them. You get, you know, like the newspaper side and the police side, like through you know, like through the aftermath of these killings, and like they're shot in like a very evocative way. They're the only parts of the film that are shot on film. The rest of the movie is shot digitally. They shot the murder scenes, and you know, to be shown in slow motion on film, and it's like they're very, very dramatic and well staged. But yeah, I think like to your point, you know, there was a certain type of like serial killer movie, you know, like that was popular in the, you know, throughout the 90s and into the thousands. And I think that like most people going to see a movie called Zodiac about a famous killer, you know, still uncaught, would probably be expecting a movie with like more kills throughout the movie. And that's not what this movie is. It really is more of like a newspaper movie and a movie about journalism and also like detective work than it is about like murder, which I think is a good thing, because that's really where the story is. But yeah, I can imagine if you're expecting like, you know, Silence of the Lambs or something, you know, and you go into Zodiac and it's just like it's a All the President's Men style newspaper movie, like you're going to have a feeling about that.
Well, and one thing too, like we never get a point of view from the killer because we don't know. And you know, something else I'll call out just in sort of my research is like even the murder scenes we see, all three of them, they hired a different actor to portray the Zodiac. You never really see his face and body, but it changes in each of those scenes because again, like there is no evidence that it was all, I mean, a lot of these are leading to the same person, but they kind of keep the audience guessing on who it potentially is. So the body type changes and hair changes in each of these murder scenes, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that's part of Fincher's like attention to detail. There is they made casting decisions for the, you know, unnamed killer in these scenes based on the descriptions of the witnesses at the time. And part of the problem with this case was always that the descriptions were different. They just slightly, and so like you get actors with voices that sound different and have different body types and behave differently in those early murder scenes. So yeah, one of my favorite little details about the way that Fincher prepared for this movie is he hired his own handwriting expert to look at the Zodiac letters. And of course, that's a huge plot point in the movie is like, you know, like a character at one point says this case has always just been about handwriting. Like it's not like that's kind of what it all hinges on. Philip Baker Hall plays the handwriting expert in this movie, who's a great character actor. This is a really fun role. You realize later he's a drunk and like, you know, maybe not the most reliable. Yeah. That's also kind of plucked from real life. Yeah. So just like an incredible attention to detail there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mentioned the movie was shot mostly on digital by Harris Savides, who had worked with David Fincher previously on Seven and also The Game, which is another San Francisco.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever talked about The Game, but you're a fan of that?
I'm a huge fan of that movie. Yeah.
Yeah. To me, that I love that movie. It's another one that I've rewatched a lot over the years. It's not as definitively a San Francisco movie, I think, even though it's shot on location.
Yeah. I actually had to think about it. I didn't realize it was actually shot in San Francisco. So
yeah,
I don't think of it in the way that I think of Zodiac, because Zodiac definitely shows some of the most iconic places and scenes in San Francisco and streets, and it's very identifiable.
For sure. I mean, Zodiac has to be set and shot in San Francisco. The Game really could be anywhere.
Yeah.
If the Game were, if Michael Douglas's character in The Game were like a tech bro or something, it would make more sense as being a San Francisco movie. But that movie kind of predates the whole, it doesn't predate Silicon Valley, obviously, but it predates our current moment of, what that kind of means. So, totally. But yeah, I love The Game a lot. And I think both of these movies ultimately are kind of top tier Fincher, and also they really do show off a city that I really like, and not in a there's a griminess particularly to Zodiac, because of the subject matter, but man, it is you get a sense of the city, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's just go right into some of our favorite scenes, because there's a bunch of scenes. I was going through them last night, making this outline. Obviously the movie opens with this kind of bravura murder sequence that's returned to again, in the last scene of the movie. It's referenced with the the same actor, same character, kind of coming back to make an identification. But this is their first little taste of violence in this movie. You have two characters going to a a lover's lane. They are gunned down. One survivor. The key to this scene is the music. It's set to Hurdy Gurdy Man by Donovan, which is a song that I will never not be able to associate with this particular scene. Yeah. Do you remember your reaction to this in the moment, the first time seeing it?
I mean, it's pretty. I mean, all of the murder scenes are kind of scary in their own way. I will say they feel very realistic. I can't help but also be very frustrated by people's lack of trusting their gut. I think maybe we know more now, obviously, than they did in the 60s. And I think people maybe didn't feel as in danger most of the time. And I think, honestly, quite frankly, serial killers have had a lot to do with that, and documentaries and stuff that we watch now. I think everyone sort of knows better. But yeah, I think there's just so many eerie feelings that you get when the car passes and he comes back around. And then in the second scene at the lake, why is there a guy watching you guys? Get up and go. That's freaky. I don't, it's so, but it's scary. And you have a note on the murder at the lake scene too, being one of your favorite scenes from the movie as well.
Yeah, I love that scene. I think this scene has a reputation for being the most brutal murder in the movie, and it definitely is, because of the way that the stabbings are
they
shot.
Show it pretty graphically.
Is it's quite graphic, and the look on their faces is something that is horrifying.
Yeah.
I have to say, it's laced with this humor that I think that's really what makes the scene work. Is there's this until the last moment, there's this belief that nothing bad will really happen, they'll get out of it.
Yeah.
But the way that the man who is stabbed delivers that line, "Maybe I could write you a check," as he's handing over his wallet, is so funny to me. And then he's trying to bargain with the Zodiac, and says "I could be helpful to you in other ways," and his girlfriend says he's a sociology major. As if that's going to be
that's the thing
useful somehow. And I just that's clearly meant to be humorous, and it's meant to kind of disarm the audience in the moment, and then it's followed up with the brutal murder. It's just really good work by him.
Yeah, he's a little pompous, a little arrogant, and definitely makes some comments, but I also think it's very realistic, again, for the time, especially. I think the worst thing that people imagine was someone was just trying to take their wallet at the time, not come and tie them up and stab them.
Right.
And yeah, it is kind of like baffling. But I mean, he's very like, he's so nonchalant through the whole thing, down to basically being stabbed. He's just like, even when he's tied up, there's like this arrogance, like he's going to get out of it. And she is very much not. She is completely opposite. She's very quiet, which again, we don't typically see with females in like horror movies or in these scenes. They're usually screaming bloody murder, and she's just like scared, and I think like completely frightened, which is, I think it's exactly how it would be. I would just like shut down completely.
Yeah.
And he's doing nothing to calm her, like at all, which also upsets me.
He's bargaining with him till the end, and actually like expresses real anger with him. There's a moment where he says like, I
think he like eggs him on a bit. Like,
he's like, it gets cold here at night. We could freeze. And then, you know, like as if that's the worst thing that could happen to you in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good scene. Also, Volkswagen Carmen Gia makes an appearance there. You're a vintage Volkswagen owner.
I am.
It's a, you know, I feel cool car. Like that's a
it's probably a lot in San Francisco at the time. I'm sure. Yeah.
How about you, Kat? What other scenes kind of like jump out to you? Like
so many.
Notable?
I'm just looking through my notes here. Obviously, the basement scene is huge and is like a great like anticipation moment, sort of. I forgot where it happens in the movie. I think there's maybe an hour 45 in or something like that when this scene happens. It's like you need something. You kind of needed that like moment of thrill to happen. And again, this is a moment in the film that we're deviating from Arthur Lee Allen, who is like really the suspect for a majority of the film, into now Rick Marshall. Is that his name?
Bob Vaughn is the.
Oh well, he's in the home of Bob Vaughn, but I think
Rick Marshall's the person they're looking for. But
it's kind of
he's
like
investigating sort of. But
this new suspect. But I mean that's definitely like obviously like a huge highlight for me.
I mean that's a like still like I've seen that scene like many times. It's still very tense, and like the way that the actor
Bob
who
Vaughn
plays
is creepy as hell.
Bob Vaughn's very creepy. The way he delivers that line where he says, you know, I drew the posters, you know, when he realizes that like,
then,
you know, he's being implicated.
He's like creepy. Like, and then he like, you know, Jake Gyllenhaal runs up the stairs and then you just see Bob.
And he's
like,
locked in the house.
Yeah. It's creepy. It's creepy. But I think it's meant to, I really think this whole scene is meant to not trick the audience, but I think it's to show like the level of insane that maybe Jake Gyllenhaal is at this point in the movie. He's been hunting this case down for, I don't know, at this point, like
for years at that point.
Maybe 10 years. Yeah. I mean, the movie spans like over 20, but yeah, I think he's just completely obsessed. And do we actually, I always thought like, oh, there is someone upstairs, but like maybe there's not. Maybe he's just, it is an old house. He's creeped out. He's now scared. He's following this different lead. And maybe he's also realizing like he probably shouldn't have just like come to this guy's house after like talking to him once and being alone with him, you know. And it is a scary moment, and maybe the house is just making some creaks and noises, and he is like completely overreacting because he's like so obsessed at this point.
Yeah. It's just sort of a classic horror movie moment.
Yeah,
it's like we get like in a movie that is really, you know, kind of like a, you know, like a slave to realism and docudrama. I love how Fincher just kind of like inserts a classic sort of like old fashioned like horror movie or like suspense thriller scene in there that still feels like authentic to the character's, you know, experience.
Totally.
Another scene that I love, and maybe this is where we talk about the Zodiac watch of it all, is the scene where they're where Mark Ruffalo, Anthony Edwards, and the I can't remember the name of the actor, but he plays the other cop on the investigation, where they're questioning Arthur Lee Allen at the, you know, the factory or refinery or wherever where he works. And that's our introduction to Arthur Lee Allen. And just a great scene. Great kind of like old fashioned like police procedural scene where it just like every line of dialogue sort of like reveals that like it seems like they got this guy, like, and of course like they don't, and like there's like many complicated reasons why like they can't really pin it on him. But yeah, there's that scene with the watch with the Zodiac Seawolf, and Mark Ruffalo says, "Hey, nice watch." And he says, "Thank you." And then he says, "Can I see it?" And he repeats himself. No, can I see
Yeah.
it? And he takes it off his wrist. And we get a nice clear shot of a Zodiac sea wolf.
Yeah, and the symbol.
And it's the watch spot that I think Zodiac is not like.
Yeah.
They can't be like too thrilled about that. But like, it's
not their fault.
It's not their fault.
Yeah.
And it's tied to history, whether they want it to be or not. That's another example of a thing that like was real and in Fincher's resource, and so it makes it into the movie. But I love that scene. I think
what's really interesting, because that scene happens maybe even a little before the middle of the movie, and I remember watching it and thinking, man, like this is the guy, and then realizing like there's still half a movie left. Like this, okay, something is gonna happen, because again, in their interview, you feel like, oh, this is him. He's super creepy, which he was a pedophile and is a creepy dude. And I think I guess we can answer this towards the end. I don't think that he was the Zodiac killer, but I do think he was an incredibly creepy guy, and a lot was wrong with him, and that doesn't help your judgment when you're looking for a serial killer. But there were so many things that didn't line up with some of the facts that were pointing towards him. But another scene, well, I will say, just like in general, I loved all of Paul Avery's like sassiness towards Graysmith, which was like the banter between Robert Downey Jr. and Jake Gyllenhaal in the movie. I thought there was a lot of jabs that were pretty hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, and that's like the thing that Robert Downey Jr. is best at. And one of the things that is like makes his like Iron Man character like so compelling. Like it's sort of like reminds me, like rewatching this movie like post, Robert Downey Jr. in the MCU. Like it really reminds me of his like relationship with Tom Holland, a little bit of Spider-Man. It has that sort of like, like older brother, younger brother, or like father son sort of like, dynamic.
Totally.
And Robert Downey Jr. is just like so good at delivering those sort of like, like good natured, insults and like, clever banter. He's great at that.
Absolutely. Also, there's a scene where there's a piece of like a bloody shirt that arrives in the newsroom addressed to Avery, and he opens it up and he's like obviously freaked out. And then it cuts to they're sort of in the room with the policeman Dave
Toschi.
Yeah, Dave Toschi. And Robert Downey Jr. is just like, I want a gun. Like immediately. I want a gun. And then it cuts to him like at the shooting range.
At the range, yeah.
Which is just it's just those scenes really back to back. I really enjoy quite a bit. Yeah.
All the editorial meetings in this movie are just like our editorial meetings at Warren and Wound, I have to say. Like that's really sort of that's my model for
we don't have a cartoonist though. That's the thing.
We should
call that out too. Like if you've never seen this movie. So yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal's character is a cartoonist that does become obsessed with the Zodiac because of all the encrypted writings and I guess I don't know what you call them.
Ciphers.
Yeah. And becomes obsessed with like helping to solve them, and he's useful for sure, but then it just like consumes him.
He quickly gets in, or not so quickly because it happens over such a long period of time, but he gets in over his head. In a major way. But I think like part of the like interesting thing about this movie is they're all in over their heads. Like they're like a part of what this movie reveals is the way that like these institutions are not working well together, and that they're not equipped to handle this case. Like you would think that like the police and the press could come together in a more thoughtful way, but there's this like tension between them always. And the bureaucracy of the sort of like intercity police departments, because the where these murders are taking place, like that's a theme of the movie. It's like it just never gets straightened out. It always like hamstrings them from the very beginning. So Graysmith is in over his head, but like also everyone is in over their head.
Totally. I mean, you see a huge lack of communication between the departments and the police and I mean, things that maybe could have helped. I think we see after the taxi killing, the policeman let go a potential suspect.
Yeah. Just because the wrong description went out over the radio. And so.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh shit, like that guy could have and probably was the killer. And then they have to sort of go and do a drawing. And I don't know how many days after that was. So it's a lost moment for sure. But it's pretty intense.
There's also that great montage after they open the tip line and you see them interviewing like, incredible cast of characters, of San Franciscans who are, all
Are they
either
San Franciscans?
claiming to be the Zodiac or have
Yeah.
information on who the Zodiac is. And they're just like, it illustrates how turned around they are, at every turn. So
I will call out one more, maybe a couple more scenes. I really like the passage of time that happens, and you see the I think it's called the Trans-America Pyramid basically being built. So it started in 1969 and ended in 1972, and so it's a way in the movie to it shows you that time and years are passing by. And you see the building being built, which is pretty iconic to San Francisco now.
Yep. You see that. You also see that building, like in the very opening of the movie. Like there's this great shot. It must have been either a helicopter or maybe a drone shot. I don't know. In 2007, of I don't know. Kind of like coming in through the bay, and you see like that building in its like beginning stages of construction. But yeah, using that specific building as a way to kind of like mark time is really smart. And like the passage of time itself is a theme in the movie. Like there's this idea, kind of like, sometimes it's sort of like buried under the surface. Other times it's like stated pretty explicitly that like it gets harder to solve these things as time goes on. There's a great scene between Jake Gyllenhaal and Mark Ruffalo at a certain point towards the end of the movie, where Gyllenhaal's kind of trying to like bring Ruffalo back in and like share new information with him, and Ruffalo says people get old, they forget, like it's too late. And he, as a cop, has had to like make peace with the fact that like this is just going to be one of those cases that isn't going to be solved, and there's like many other cases he needs to.
And he makes the point during that monologue too that like I can't remember the exact numbers, but like so many more people die every year.
Yeah.
And, the Zodiac killer, they only have tied to these 3 murders. Like there's bigger fish to fry, basically, in the world of San Francisco. And again, because of so much time has passed, like it's really a dead end for them right now. They can't focus,
Yeah.
And he's always been trying to be helpful to Jake, but also he's like, I like that he reiterates, like, I'm the cop here, and like it's my job.
Right.
It's not really yours to solve this. And I don't think Jake is too happy with that, but like needs to accept that. But you know what? He goes on and writes a book, and then there's a movie made about it. So
yeah, I think he's
doing all right.
Yeah, I think he's doing all right. He does eventually bring Toschi kind of like back into the fold. And the other scene I want to talk about is this like great scene between Graysmith and Toschi at a diner towards the very end of the movie. Graysmith has gone to Toschi's house. Yeah. They're like they're kind of like they're kind of like at odds with each other because of I forget exactly what happened. Like there's this like element of like implicating Toschi in the crime.
Yeah.
Somehow there's tension between Graysmith and Toschi towards the end. But he goes to his house in the middle of the night. They go to a diner, and Graysmith just kind of like lays out everything that he knows, and like he has the perspective, and the movie kind of shares his perspective that it's Arthur Lee Allen.
Yeah.
And he kind of like goes through all the evidence, and there's this like great moment towards the end of their conversation where he like takes a salt and pepper shaker and like illustrates how close Arthur Lee Allen was to that first victim.
Yeah.
And he's like, and it's just like this great moment. And Toschi says, how do you know? Like, how do you know all this? And Graysmith says, he walked it.
Yeah.
This great line. And like the shot of, where he says that, and it zeroes in on Graysmith's face, and then Toschi's reaction is just really perfect. And you realize Graysmith has been to that location, and this is the location that we saw in that first scene of the movie, and that happens off screen. Like we don't see that. And you kind of understand like, oh, he's actually like really kind of been a cop through this entire stretch that we haven't explored on screen
in a way. Yeah.
So yeah, I love that scene. Like I find that like that's a kind of like a chilling moment, I thought.
Yeah. I also quite like the scene in Graysmith's apartment where he is with his kids, and they're all working on the case, and he's like, don't tell your mom.
Yeah.
Which I think again just kind of shows his like obsessiveness. And eventually she leaves him with the children because they're getting a lot of mysterious calls to the apartment, and someone breathing on the other line, which is also kind of freaky and scary, especially as he's put himself out there and the media is know who he is, and he's been reporting, and he's made himself now a target, and she's not quite happy with that. Neither would I. when there's a serial killer on the loose. So very fair that she leaves him.
It's interesting how certain Graysmith is that like he's not in danger because he's so certain that it's Arthur Lee Allen, and it's like, you know, he's in jail like during this time, and so like he doesn't really have much fear. So
but again, I think it we don't know that it was him. And he very well may have been getting calls from the Zodiac killer. Like we just don't know.
You don't think it was him? You said a few minutes ago that you have a different theory. So let's.
I mean, it's not that I don't think it was him. I feel like it's very possible. Like the Zodiac was multiple people in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Look, this is just purely my opinion, and I have not done any research on this. But
you didn't walk it. You didn't go to the.
No, I didn't walk it.
You didn't walk it.
Maybe they'll add that to my to-do list while we're in San Francisco. I just feel like based on the movie and some of the things I was reading after. I watched it and like was doing a little bit of research online. There's just so much inconsistency, and I don't know. I feel like for that time, it's possible that there were some random killings and like people were claiming them as being Zodiac murders, and you know, there's upwards of like 35 plus murders potentially linked to the Zodiac killer, but without any hard evidence. So it's so wishy-washy, and I think. Is it Lee Arthur Allen or Arthur Lee Allen?
Arthur Lee Allen.
Arthur Lee Allen. I get that really mixed up. I think he's a bad dude, and it's possible he was one of the killers to these murders, but I don't necessarily think that he did all of them. And maybe there was a second person, which they allude to. There was potentially a killer, and they were in cahoots together.
Yeah. That seems reasonable to me. I think that, I don't know. I haven't really formed an opinion. I feel like the movie, like I said, it does takes the perspective. It takes Graysmith's perspective that it's Arthur Lee Allen, and it kind of like settles the viewer into that. Like I don't have the feeling. A movie that I sometimes think about sort of like as a pair with this movie is JFK, which is all about like, you know, the a potential conspiracy around the JFK assassination, and like you watch JFK and you think to yourself, I want to figure out like what actually happened. And you watch Zodiac, at least I watch Zodiac, and I feel like, well, I don't know what actually happened, but I feel like, you know, the movie presents a pretty coherent idea, and I don't need to like solve this case. But like when I watch JFK, I think like I want to dive into every I want to read the Warren Commission report. I want to read every book.
Yeah. I mean, there's things like I forgot the gentleman's name that's the like handwriting expert in the movie. But he sort of dismisses that it's him because of the inaccuracies in the writing. And then, you know, then it's like played later that he's a drunk, but like he's also like super old and has been doing this his whole life. Like maybe did that really affect his work? I don't know. Like there's just big question marks around it all.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep. The case officially was never solved. It's I don't know that it's still open in 2026, but they never were successful in pinning the Zodiac murders on anyone. Any other scenes stick out to you?
I did quite like the birthday scenes of Bill, who is Mark Ruffalo's partner in the movie.
Yeah.
There's a couple of, years pass, and they just happen to fall on his birthday, and they're investigating, which eventually Bill leaves him as like a partner and goes on to a different department. But I don't know. I kind of like those scenes that it says falls on his birthday.
Yeah. Just one other scene or like group of scenes I'll call out is any scene where Brian Cox appears as Melvin Belli, who is a real life figure. Just like really,
Him
really
in the back
great.
of the car is pretty funny.
Yeah, very funny. If folks haven't seen the documentary concert film "Gimme Shelter" about the Rolling Stones concert at Altamont, Melvin Belli, the real Melvin Belli, appears in that movie, and he's also like as mentioned in Zodiac, like he's, you know, he also like acted like he did an episode of Star Trek.
Wow,
like that's real.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so like I would Gimme Shelter's a great movie, so I would recommend watching that. But you get a sense of like Melvin Belli in that movie and how good the Brian Cox portrayal is. It's he's
awesome.
It's pretty spot on. So
I'll have to watch it.
Yeah. How does this rank for you in terms of? We'll talk about how this movie ranks in two ways, in terms of like San Francisco movies, and then also in terms of like Fincher's filmography. So like.
Yeah, San Francisco.
Let's take San Francisco first. Like, what? Okay. Where does this rank for you in terms of like?
So I will say it ranks number 2, only because I am a massive Mrs. Doubtfire fan. And that movie is the first thing I think about. That and maybe like Full House when I'm in San Francisco come to mind just because of the architecture. But I will say this ranks number 2 for me. Maybe 3 would be like The Rock, which I also is like pretty iconic from my childhood.
Yeah, The Rock is great. So yeah, The Rock is definitely up there for me. There's just some great like shots of San Francisco, you know, in that movie, and the way they use Alcatraz and like real locations is really, really cool. And like definitely a remnant of an era where like you could still do that. Like I feel like if they made The Rock today, that, you know, they shoot it in Vancouver or something and try to make it look like San Francisco, and it just wouldn't be quite right. Mrs. Doubtfire is a childhood favorite of mine as well, and also like some iconic San Francisco stuff. Basic Instinct is another one that's set in San Francisco. That is not a movie we'll be doing on the Time on Screen podcast. It's a great movie. Great is not the right word. It's a good
movie. It's iconic.
It's like compulsively entertaining and like just really, but just not something we want to talk about on the Time on Screen podcast. Probably not. I don't know.
Maybe
we'll see.
Time on Screen after
that would be an adults only podcast. I think not a family episode. But that movie really does have some great San Francisco stuff in it as well. But like, I mean, honestly, like Zodiac is
so good. Yeah, it's up there.
Is it for me? Bullet is another one. We've done Bullet on the podcast. Like that's another good San Francisco
Vertigo
movie. But it's just such a great it's a great location, you know, for because it's like it's unmistakable in its geography. Yeah. And it just like it really lends itself to like
there's absolutely no mistaking that you're in San Francisco. Yeah. When you see some of these scenes in the streets and the hills and the architecture in the homes, it's very, very identifiable. Yeah, which is really cool.
All right. So in terms of the Fincher filmography,
this is hard.
I didn't ask you to like prepare a list or anything, but like just off the top of your head,
I did, obviously.
All right. Well, let's hear it. What's your Fincher list?
So number 1 is Zodiac for me. This is my favorite Fincher movie for sure. Gosh, this is like, it's hard to rank them because I truly am just a Fincher fan in general. I'd say number 2, I'm going to go with 7. Number 3, The Game. And then I added like as just like, I don't know, an add-on Panic Room because I am a Panic Room fan. Yeah, and I love that movie. I think it's very underrated too. So yeah, that's sort of my 4.
So you don't have Social Network in your top 4?
No, because I am not a Jesse Eisenberg fan. And that movie is great. And I tried to like, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of his. I like some of the things he's been in, but it's just not my favorite. It's not a rewatchable movie for me. It's great. It's a fantastic movie, but it's just not a rewatch. And if it's not a rewatch, then it's not a favorite.
Okay. I mean, for me, The Social Network is number 1. Yeah. Like, I think that it's like sort of like the like great, like towering achievement of his career. And like, I think that it's like probably will be like the movie that, unless he makes, I don't know, he'd have to make something pretty spectacular, like late in his life to like,
there's still time.
Yeah. He's got a movie coming out this year.
Oh, does he?
The
Brad Pitt.
Yes. The Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Yeah, Continuing Adventures of Cliff Booth, which is a Netflix movie written by Quentin Tarantino, directed by David Fincher.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, so there's currently some speculation as to like how that movie will roll out. Obviously, it'll be on the Netflix service. And I think there's some speculation about whether it gets like a larger theatrical release ahead of that. Netflix obviously doesn't like to do that. But yeah, like I want to see a Fincher movie in the theater. That to me doesn't scream like Oscar to me necessarily.
No, me neither.
Very curious to see it. Very little is known about it at this point. But I mean, who knows what he has left, you know, in his career. He's not like, you know, he's got years left of, you know, making movies in him, hopefully. But I mean, he'd have to do something pretty special to eclipse The Social Network, in my opinion. But for me, it's like, kind of like The Social Network and Zodiac is like 1A and 1B, and then I really love 7. I think 7 is probably like certainly a top 5 Fincher movie for me. And I also love Gone Girl. I think Gone Girl is like maybe the later Fincher movie that is like most underrated. And The Killer. I think the 2023's The Killer.
The Killer was surprisingly good. Yeah, I like that one.
Is also really, really great. I'll tell you what doesn't hold up as well for me. I rewatched it recently. Is Fight Club. I think that
Fight Club for me doesn't do anything for me. I think it's overhyped, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, like Fight Club sort of like indoctrinated me into like being like a David Fincher guy. Like,
for a lot
and
of
in,
people, yeah.
Yeah. And in 1999, I was like the right age, for that movie, impressionable teenager, like, really ready for something transgressive. And it just feels kind of dated, at this point. Also love the game. I mean, there really isn't like
the girl with the dragon tattoo. I love that movie, and
it's really
I'm
great.
sad we didn't get more Fincher finishing the series with that, because that's another great like detective movie and journalist. Yeah, so good. I love that.
Yeah, he doesn't have a bad movie in his filmography, in my opinion. I mean, even Alien 3, his first movie, which he's kind of like,
not my favorite Alien, but it's not bad either.
Yeah, like it has little seeds of like what would come later. So yeah, just like an incredibly, generational filmmaker, just like incredible. And then I don't know if you've like ever dug into his like music videos and commercials.
Some of them, I didn't realize.
He's directed a lot of great commercials. Like if you can spend a considerable amount of time on YouTube watching his Gap commercials. Like he's made some like really good commercials for the Gap.
I saw some pretty iconic music videos. I think even like I can't remember, a Michael Jackson video that I had no idea he directed in like MJ's heyday, which is crazy.
Yeah. Just a lot of he's made a lot of good stuff. He's a like I said, generational talent.
Yeah.
Any final words on Zodiac or Fincher before we wrap it up? Any movies you'd recommend, like as like, if you like this, you should check out?
Well, definitely All the President's Men, because it's was really inspired by that. But I think Spotlight was the one that kind of came to mind.
Spotlight's good, yeah.
I also put Truth, which is sort of a journalistic drama about Dan Rather and the investigation around like George Bush's like military service records. It's also got Cate Blanchett in it. She's really amazing in it. I think it's a very underrated movie. The Post, I also thought of, which is Steven Spielberg, Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks. And then I thought about one as we were talking. Maybe you go ahead, and maybe it'll come to me here in a second.
I mean, honestly, All the President's Men was the one that I think is like really stands out the most. I think that's a that's the movie that was in Fincher's mind when he was like kind of like conceiving Zodiac. And I think that if you watch those movies like back to back, you'd see like there's like real tight similarities in terms of like, especially like the pacing and the editing, of those movies. There's like there's a real link there. And I've had the conversation with people, in the past about Zodiac and like kind of like claiming it as a newspaper movie and a movie about journalism, and like that doesn't always really ring. I think people still want to think of it as like a serial killer. Yeah, I think it's clearly a movie that's focused on journalism. But if you watch this movie with All the President's Men, I think it's like it becomes very, very clear that it's a newspaper movie, kind of like in the classic sense.
Totally.
So
yeah, I love it. It'll continue to be a comfort watch for me.
Yeah, so very strange, kind of psychotic comfort movie, but like it's
okay.
It's just really good. Sometimes you just want to be in the hands of a great filmmaker.
I will say, like, Spotlight is that for me too. I watch Spotlight several times a year, and it's like the subject matter is like obviously terrible, but that movie is so good, and I like a slow burn drama. I don't know. It's like Tar. Tar is a relaxing movie for me too. I'm weird.
Me
in that
and
way.
you and Brett Braley are all big Tar fans.
Which I feel like has some David Fincher elements to that movie. Maybe that's why I like it so much. But
yeah, I think there's like a kind of iciness and like closed off kind of like style to Tar that is sort of like Fincher-esque. I think of Fincher and I think of Kubrick sometimes when I watch Tar.
Good. Yeah. What about you? Any final thoughts about the movie and Fincher in general?
It's just a great movie. It's a great San Francisco movie, and it's catches like its three main actors at like really interesting points in their career. Spotlight is an interesting discussion point for Ruffalo, but yeah, it's just like it's a great achievement, and I think like years from now, like this will be a movie that people will look back on and think like 2007. Had like so many great movies, and this was sort of like the one that like is maybe. Not forgotten, but like sort of like unacknowledged compared to some of the other giants. Like you think about like, like No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood specifically, you have like, generational filmmakers in those cases as well. And like, the Coen brothers and PTA both made like career best work. And I think you could like also make the case that Fincher made career best work in 2007 with Zodiac. So it's like a really kind of like unusual situation where you have like, you know, maybe like the three most important filmmakers and, you know, filmmaking teams of like, of that generation. Like these are all kind of like late Gen X, you know, filmmakers, and they're all just like pumping out masterpieces in 2007. It's crazy.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I wish we could go back in time.
Same for so many reasons.
Yeah.
All right, Kat. Well, thanks so much for coming on Time on Screen to talk Zodiac. Always a pleasure. And thank you all for
see you in San Francisco.
Listening. We'll see you in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Don't wear the Zodiac hood in the Windup Watch Fair.
Yeah.
Keep that at home.
But come to the Windup Watch Fair.
Yeah,
we're
come to the
be
Windup
there
Watch
this
Fair.
weekend.
Yeah.
May 1st through 3rd. And come talk about Zodiac with us. We love to.
Or watches.
Or watches.
We'd love to see you there regardless. Thanks, Kat.
All right.